The July 5th, Tuesday, 2016 Plainfield Planning Commission meeting is called to order. All rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Segerbrook.
Here.
Commissioner Renzi.
Here.
Commissioner Heinen.
Here.
Commissioner Green.
Here.
Chairman Kiefer.
Here.
Park District. School District. Fire District. Library District.
Thank you. We have in your packet the minutes from the June 7th, 2016 meeting. Are there any corrections or clarifications? Okay, hearing none, we will accept the minutes as presented. At this time, do we have any comments from anybody in the audience, from the public, about something that is not on our agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Staff, do we have a development report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The village board did meet subsequent to our last plan commission meeting, and there were just a few items of planning related interest I wanted to note for you. First off, the annexation of the existing single family home lot just south of the Lakelands proceeded, so that was approved by ordinance for the annexation and annexation agreement. And so the homeowners there are working with the building department on their building plans. Not directly planning related, this wasn't before the plan commission, but the village approved a design service agreement with Upland Design, located here in Plainfield, to assist with coming up with some conceptual plans for entry monument signs, and also a sign palette for kind of secondary gateway or monument locations. So there will be some prototypical plans and also a palette of landscape plant materials and kind of prototypical landscape designs that we can choose to implement as the opportunity arises, as we choose to budget for, and so forth. That process will involve some public outreach and focus group to kind of design charrette. So I would anticipate there would be an opportunity for plan commissioners to participate to the extent you're interested. I kind of wanted to call that opportunity to your attention. And then the third...
Did they identify which sites they want to use first, like up on 59?
We have some potential locations in mind. You know, the logical ones are, as you enter into the village, there are 4 or 5 locations where we currently have some entrance signage. So this would provide an opportunity to replace that, and in part with the Route 30 construction at Renwick Road and Route 30, where IDOT has some property that it's using for detention. We have an opportunity to construct some kind of gateway or monument signage there as well. So part of this is motivated by trying to have a design in place that would dovetail with our construction schedule. So, and then the last thing I wanted to note, the board did take up the issue or the question of allowance for a food truck on a kind of an ongoing basis at a location here in the village. And that prompted a suggestion for having a further discussion, which is scheduled for next Monday's Committee of the Whole. But there's a chance as a byproduct of that we would come back with a text amendment for the Plan Commission's consideration for actually implementing formal regulations for food trucks in the zoning code. And that concludes the development report.
Thank you. Under old business, we have none, so we'll move directly into new business. The first case before you is case number 1724-043016.REZ/SPR, and it's for the site of 15233 South Joliet Road, and the request is for a rezoning and site plan review. Do we have a staff report for that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rezoning component of this case requires a public hearing, and staff would ask that the record reflect that the appropriate notice has been published and posted on the property in accordance with state statute and local ordinance. In terms of general site context, this is a small existing lot, part of the addition to Corbin's addition to the Plainfield. So the lot itself dates back to the mid 1800s. It's located generally east of Route 59 and kind of north or east of Route 30 or Joliet Road as well. To the north is the Overman Jones Funeral Home and parking areas. To the north and east is a vacant lot that's used for parking currently under the same ownership as the applicant. Kind of to the south and east, we have Dillman Street, and across the road from there is the old Rod Baker Ford dealership. And to the west, we have Joliet Road, Route 30, and the former Gotain gas station site, which is currently vacant. The request that's before the commission tonight is kind of twofold, and this is somewhat of an unusual case. There's a request to rezone the subject parcel from its current zoning, which is R1, to business transition or BT zoning. And what's unusual about this case is in most business transition requests, the proposal is to reuse the existing residential structure for a light intensity commercial use. Think attorney, CPA, things of that nature. In this case, due to the condition of the home and the extensive repairs that would be required, the petitioner is actually proposing to demolish the structure and rebuild with a brand new modern structure that would be constructed at a residential scale to hopefully fit in with the neighborhood and the mass of homes and be essentially consistent with what a business transition use would have been there if the existing structure were viable and could be saved. The demolition request actually requires review by the Historic Preservation Commission, and that aspect has been scheduled for a public hearing before the HPC, which will be held next Thursday. So the second component of this evening's request is for site plan review to allow approval of the new proposed structure. So in terms of the rezoning request, the property is located in an area that's designated in the comprehensive plan as transitional commercial. So this does correspond with the business transition zoning district. The comprehensive plan identifies a wide area along our major arterials, so primarily along Route 59, but as well along Route 30, and some areas along Main Street. And the village's approach to business transition zoning has been to not proactively rezone properties to BT, but to defer to the property owners to come in and request that rezoning at the time they feel it's appropriate. The subject property that's before you, I did include in the packet the historic survey form that corresponds with the property. It does date back to, I believe, the 1880s. And, oh, thanks, Marilee has it for me right here. But unfortunately, the condition has deteriorated, especially there's a rear addition that needs quite a bit of work. It's not on a modern foundation. It doesn't have modern HVAC or electric, for example. So staff does concede that it would require extensive work to restore, to renovate. It is always staff's preference to save an existing building where at all possible. And so we'll kind of defer to the HPC's full consideration of that question. It's staff's opinion that the rezoning request is fairly straightforward, and I'll kind of summarize those findings. And then when we touch upon the site plan review, it's my suggestion that we kind of evaluate that, not just with an eye on verifying compliance with the zoning code, but as well offering suggestions for how the new proposed structure could fit in with the kind of historic character of the area. So I'll take them kind of one at a time. In terms of the rezoning request, there are 5 findings of fact that the Plan Commission must make in order to recommend approval of the rezoning. The first is that the rezoning promotes the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare and complies with the policies and plans of the village. Staff believes that business transition is the most appropriate zoning district for the subject site, as this is how it's identified in the comprehensive plan. The zoning is appropriate for the parcel's location at the intersection of 2 major arterials, those being Route 59 and Joliet Road. The business transition zoning district calls for a low-intensity commercial use in a residentially scaled building, and that is what that applicant is proposing in this case, which would allow for commercial use of the structure at these high-traffic locations. The second finding is that the trend of development in the area is consistent with the requested rezoning. There are a number of business transition zoned parcels in the vicinity of Route 59, generally between Newkirk Avenue to the south and Main Street or Route 126 to the north. There is one immediately north of the Overman Jones Funeral Home and a handful on the west side of Route 59 in direct proximity to the subject site. So staff submits that the requested business transition zoning is entirely consistent with the trend of development in the area. The third required finding of fact is that the new zoning allows uses that are more suitable than those allowed under the existing zoning. Excuse me. So staff does believe that given the parcel's proximity to Route 59 and US 30 or Joliet Road, with the high traffic volumes, that this area is becoming increasingly less viable for single-family residential uses, and that the light intensity commercial use would be more appropriate at this location than a single-family residence. The next finding is that the property cannot yield a reasonable use under the existing zoning, and especially given the condition of the existing structure, staff believes it would be increasingly challenging to maintain a viable single-family residence use at this specific location, again, in particular with reference to the high traffic volumes and with the widening of Route 59, the lack of adequate front yard setbacks. The structure is very close to Route 59 and would be not ideally suited for residential use. And then the last finding is that the rezoning would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, nor would it be a substantial detriment to adjacent properties. Staff believes that this is actually an important location for a business transition use. The alternatives, potentially simply expanded parking, in staff's opinion, would be detrimental, and we believe the residentially scaled light intensity commercial business would be a complement and would help maintain the fabric of the core of the area here. Certainly staff does not see any negative impacts resulting from the proposed zoning at this location. So in summary, staff believes all findings of fact related to the requested rezoning can be demonstrated. Moving forward to the site plan review. Once again, the typical site plan review for a business transition project would entail looking at the existing structure, identifying how it would be adaptively reused, and then potentially looking at what additional improvements are needed, for example, parking or fencing, landscaping, buffering, that type of thing. In this case, the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing structure and reconstruct with a new residentially scaled building. There is precedent for this. There is a building, I believe the current business use is Vision Care. It's an eye optometrist related building. It's a kind of a prairie style 4-square on the east side of Route 59, a handful of homes north of here. So we do have an example or a precedent in the village of a new construction structure being built in a business transition zoned lot. It's not ideal, it's not our first choice, but in cases where the existing structure is perhaps not viable, the zoning code does allow for it. The proposed site plan calls for taking access from Dillman Street to the east. The existing building itself is approximately 2,300 square feet, I believe, in footprint. It will be proposed as 2 stories. The ground floor use would include potentially 3 shared office spaces with a shared conference room, restrooms, coffee area, and so forth. And then the upper floor is proposed to have 2 residential units, so two apartments on the second floor. With respect to parking, the proposed parking lot would provide, I believe, at a minimum 16 spaces. I've got a couple of versions that are striped. The particular one I have here is not striped, but it could be more than 16. I know at a minimum it's 16 spaces. There are a total of 11 spaces required. 8 of those would be for the first floor commercial use, and 3 spaces would be required for the residential use on the second floor. So the proposed parking is in excess of what the minimum required parking would be per the zoning code. With respect to engineering or stormwater management, as the commission is aware, we do not require a full set of final engineering plans at site plan review. In addition, due to the size of the lot being, just see if I have that listed here, approximately 4,400 square feet falls well below the threshold where on-site detention would be required. So staff does not foresee any significant issues that would result from the future subsequent engineering review. In terms of zoning code compliance, the proposed structure, when taken in combination with the vacant lot to the north or east, satisfies the majority of the minimum bulk and density standards in terms of lot size, lot width, building height, floor area ratio, and so forth. So their staff's identified no specific zoning code issues for consideration. Moving on to the proposed facade or elevations. This is perhaps where I'd invite the Commission's input to the greatest extent. Obviously, the Commission's input is always welcome on any issues, but in particular with respect to incorporating the new structure into the fabric of the existing downtown area. This is a kind of a Georgian style home. I'll move forward. This is the, excuse me for bouncing around. So this would be the Route 59 or Joliet Road elevation, kind of the front elevation. It's got a gabled front with a hipped roof, front porch element, moving back to the Dillman Street side. So this would be kind of the secondary elevation of the main pedestrian entrance for the ground floor commercial. Includes an accessible ramp for the primary entrance there, and you can see a secondary entrance that would be under the front porch element. And then again, back to the rear elevation. So this would be the elevation that you see coming up from the parking lot. And to the right here, if I bounce back one more time. So this is on the north, and the entrance that you see here is a separate entrance that would provide access to the residential uses on the second floor. So overall, staff feels that the massing and the style of the home, it is a traditional vernacular that would be compatible with the downtown. There may be some recommendations, whether from staff, from Plan Commission, and I know certainly the Historic Preservation Commission will address the issue, opportunities for incorporating minor design elements that would further reinforce that connection with the downtown, whether it be something as minor as providing operable shutters, a window fenestration that's consistent with some of the 1800s homes that you'd see in the area, potentially some adjustments to the roof line to kind of minimize the massing slightly from what's proposed. But in general, staff feels that the proposed elevations certainly are in compliance with the requirements of the zoning code, and that there may be some minor recommendations that would further reinforce the building's tie to the downtown. At this point, there have not been landscaping or photometric plans submitted. We believe that it would be appropriate to request those if there's support from the Plan Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. So staff is proposing stipulations that would make that a requirement prior to the project moving forward for Village Board consideration. However, given the site context, we certainly don't believe that there is potential for great lighting impacts, and likewise, we're confident that the landscape plan could be developed without any significant issues. In terms of trash enclosure, likewise, there's not a location for a trash enclosure currently proposed in the parking lot. Clearly, there's extensive area available if it's the choice to have that utility provided exterior to the building as opposed to the interior. But we would propose that that detail be incorporated as well. So, in conclusion, staff supports the requested rezoning request. Likewise, if it's determined that it's not viable to save the building, staff would be in support of construction of a new residentially scaled building. Staff believes that the proposed building is in compliance with the requirements of the zoning code and would be seeking recommendation of the site plan review as well. And that concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Is there anyone here representing the applicant? Could I get you to approach this microphone over here? We will swear you in, and you can add any testimony that you might want to. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear that all testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you? Please state your name for the recording secretary and then proceed with your testimony.
Brett Fessler, 330 South Wright Street. I represent Baker Enterprises. Thank you, Commissioners, for seeing our case. This is a difficult corner, as you can imagine, over there, and we're in between the Route 59 and Route 30 and Dillman Street, and we have a very old home that is in need of repair, so it's a difficult one. We looked at some options to save it, and it's just not an option. It doesn't. It's very tiny, and just there's not a lot of uses for it that meet today's codes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me.
Okay, please be available. We may have some questions for you. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to ask a question or provide testimony? Seeing none, we'll open up questions and comments to the commissioners.
Thank you. This is to the applicant. A finding we're supposed to make is that property cannot yield a reasonable use under existing zoning. So basically, there's been, in our report, I think words like impractical and infeasible been used, but we probably should back that up with some sort of testimony. So do you have a list of what kind of repairs are needed or renovations you would put in that basically render it infeasible?
Entire electrical system and the foundation is just in, yeah, there's a lot of code failures. Your code enforcement has stopped by and asked us to repair plenty of them.
Okay.
It's the roof, the entire structure is
Okay. So let me
It's just
then
not-
ask staff, do you have a list of the building code violations?
I'm familiar with some of the work that's required, but staff would take one step further, even assuming that the structure itself were viable. It's staff's opinion that the proximity to Route 59 is really what makes it a challenge for residential use. We hear consistently that from some of these older homes is a challenge in marketing them. There's a lack of demand on the residential side.
Oh, I understand that, but I think that goes to more of the other findings that we're supposed to make as opposed to finding D. And D can easily be met if there is a litany of impractical and infeasible repairs.
But I can outline it.
And so what I'm asking then is if you could supplement your report when it goes to the village to say, here it is, the list that our inspectors found of the property. And what I'm thinking is then you would be able to say, yes, and it would cost X dollars to renovate that and to bring it all up to code. And if we were to rent it, we probably wouldn't get anywhere near X, let alone the value. And then all of a sudden, finding D makes itself. That's what I'm thinking. Because
I would assume some of this would have to go forward to the historical commission for the demolition permit, right?
I think that'll be the
But
primary
It would be good to include
primary
it with our,
focus, but just for summary for the commission's information, the list includes the roof for the entire structure, the HVA system. The foundation is only a partial gravel foundation. It's supported by columns that have cinder blocks inserted in them to help with the settling of the foundation, and the electrical for the entire building. So the repairs that would be needed.
Well, I think that's the list that Commissioner Renzi's speaking
yeah,
to. That
I'm
would be
looking
useful
at
to know.
something, yeah, because it would supplement this nicely. And that brings another point. I, too, agree that maybe it all should be presented to the historical committee. But the one question, though, I do have is, why are we hearing this before the Historical Preservation Committee? Because we would not have any discussion of site plan review if they say, no destruction of the house.
I acknowledge that would be a logical order. I think we were trying to keep the project on target so that recommendations would come forth from both bodies. This was scheduled for the HPC in June, and I requested a continuance just to provide some photographs and some other information that I thought would make for comprehensive consideration on the part of the HPC. So just a few delays on my part, but
I understand that, but also, just to interrupt you, you don't have any photometrics either. We don't have any placement of garbage, and one would think there should be a garbage if you're gonna have an office on the first floor and 2 apartments upstairs. We also don't have any place designated for handicapped, accessible, and maybe it's striped, but all that could change too. And I don't know if it's 100% paving or if there's going to be the insertion of any greenery with trees or bushes or that sort of thing, how the parking lot is ultimately supposed to look. And
And even if any of the trees that currently exist would be preserved, or if they're all coming down?
so I'm thinking we probably, unless there's some need, we would probably continue this anyway to get all that information so we could make a full decision on all information.
I guess from my perspective, I think those are details that can be worked out at staff level. I mean, I think, you know, of all those things that you mentioned, my concern would probably be landscape. But if the neighbors, if the residents adjacent to this lot, especially to the, I guess that's north and west, you know, don't have concerns with this, you know, and it seems like they don't since they're not here tonight. It seems like that could be, you know, happen at the staff level too.
But from our end, that's exactly what we proposed. We didn't want to put a bunch of money in and then find out that the historic didn't want it knocked down. So it's kind of a timing issue. If this was just
I
a
agree.
normal tear down house and it didn't have the historic, so I apologize for the order, but it is one of those things that we are gonna have to comply with ordinance and staff and putting in the required.
And the commission knows that, you know, we're looking at really 2 issues. The rezoning is the R1 to the BT, so that's something we need to consider. And then we all understand that the site plan review is all contingent on whether a demolition permit is issued. And
Right.
That's beyond our purview, but that would also impact that.
Yeah, and from a zoning perspective, I think that only makes sense to rezone this to, you know, BT, since it seems like all those properties to the north of Route 30 are in that business transition. This is an odd piece, so it just seems like that would work, you know, to rezone that. So I'm in favor of it.
I agree with what he said as to everything. The only caveat that I would add is that my understanding is if we do go to, well, what if the planning commission, or I'm sorry, we are the planning commission, what if the historical commission says go ahead and demolish, then you're asking us for issues like fenestration and bollards and all that sort of thing, which is really then details that we wouldn't get to, but for the fact the historical commission said go ahead with the tear down. So that's the part that.
Well, I think if we can separate into 2 issues, I mean, let's look at them one at a time, setting aside the tear down versus reuse of the property. But the traffic along there, Jonathan, what sort of volume of traffic are we looking at along Route 30 there? It's pretty high, isn't it? It's
Yeah, Route 59 is in excess of 30,000 vehicles per day, and Route 30 coming into that intersection, I believe, is on the order of 25,000 trips per day.
Wow. I wouldn't want my kids playing around traffic like that. So, and on 3 sides of this, there's already commercial properties, right?
Essentially on all 4, I mean, I know it's
Okay,
an offset
so
intersection, but yeah.
It's a lone residence on the edge of a building transition zone in an area that has, or a business transition zone that has an incredible amount of traffic. So, I mean, it's a slam dunk pretty much saying that it's more appropriate to be business transition than residential, so, right? I mean, so that first issue, I think, we're all in agreement then, right?
Well, Mr. Sagerberg, should you weigh in?
Yeah, one question I have is, I mean, so how long have you controlled this property?
Well, it's been in the Baker family so, you know, they own the adjacent property
Right.
across the street, which is the old dealership, and he's
Sure.
had it for the last 20 years. And, you know, it was a rental home, and as it dilapidated over the years, it's come apart. It's just, you know, we looked at some options to save it. It just got to where it got so far out of hand that it just
Okay. But I mean, in general, have you been able to keep
been here
it?
for 50 years and in town 53 years. So he owns the property next door. We're not going to.
Right. I mean, have you been able to keep it leased for residential property?
Up until the last year, a little over a year and a half, and then the roof started coming apart, and that's when code enforcement,
Okay.
and, you know, and then the structure starts coming apart, like Jonathan said, with some of the beams. It's just not feasible anymore. It needs too much.
Right.
That's why we're gonna look at it down the path with historical and what's historical preservation, you know, and assuming that they don't want anything that's in there and going with that, path, you know, that's what.
Right. Well, I certainly agree we need to consider the two issues separately, and I mean, just for a moment, assume that there would be a way to rehab the structure and save it. I mean, the business transition zoning would still make sense, you know, even, and obviously that's what it's based for, you know, typically really done for is to try and reuse existing buildings. So, I mean, no question the zoning makes sense. It's just a question really of, you know, I mean, you know, looking at the survey, it is, I think, you know, kind of an interesting little house. But I mean, aside from the condition of it, you know, but like Commissioner Renzi said, I mean, to talk about, you know, an entire site plan review of a new structure and parking and everything else that goes with it. I mean, that when everything hinges on, you know, another body's decision, that's kind of, I think, stepping, you know, maybe a little too far tonight.
Existing lot behind it is already there.
Right.
It's an existing gravel lot. Anything we do will enhance it.
Right.
It's a gravel
Well,
parking lot as it sits.
I think some of the reservations are that they feel some of the information in the site plan isn't complete for what they would like to see. There's a couple things we can do. I mean, obviously, we can take the map amendment as one motion, but the site plan review, we can either look at what's presented to us this evening, which was in the planner's report and the applicant. We can add stipulations to it, or we can request that it comes back after the action from the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm open to suggestions. Is there a preference on the part of staff? Normally, when we've had something like this in the past, we kept both motions together and continued both cases instead of doing a piecemeal.
In this case, I think a continuance would make sense. I don't know that, I'm hearing support for the rezoning request, so I don't know that we need to make a motion on one and continue on the other. And I guess timing-wise, the Historic Preservation Commission will meet on the 14th. And at that point, we're probably too late to get on the agenda for the following village board meeting anyway. So if this case were to come back on the 19th to the Plan Commission, well, it wouldn't alter the.
I mean, I don't think this is going to be a big delay, but I think some of the information that we're looking for, and hopefully the applicant is hearing us, is some more complete details on the parking, the photometric, and landscaping and trash enclosures. Seems to be the main things we're looking for.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Certainly.
Applicant? So Brett, I guess if we did continue to the next plan commission, does that affect your schedule in any way? Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it, but I just don't see the need. We're going to meet anything that's obviously within the staff code. If we put a driveway down there and primed that gravel lot, anything would be an improvement. So I don't understand the differentiation. It's not like we're doing a Chili's parking lot with curb and gravel and sewer and water. This is a gravel parking lot with weeds in it right now and a rundown house on it that we're waiting for the Historic Commission to look at. So if you've seen the site, bollards, parking bollards, we're talking about a handicap line stripe space that'll be provided on a drawing that has to meet a local ordinance, and the garbage dumpster will be an enclosed garbage dumpster that'll be put on a site plan that'll have to meet the code.
Okay, well, and
But if you
we
need to see it
understand it,
again,
but it's none of that is in the packet that we received. And I think I can speak for the commission in that we've had some of this frustration with other cases sometimes too, where they come before us. We ask for site plan review, and we don't have a complete information packet to go over all of the things. Is there a consensus by the commission? What would you like to do with this?
Is this actually two lots right now that needs to be consolidated then too, or?
Staff's suggestion is to either hold them as one by covenant or process a final plat of merger and re-subdivision so that they're one. They're currently they're owned by the applicant
Right,
in
but
two
it is,
entities. It's not the same legal entity that owns both lots. It's that applicant that's before us. But
oh, okay.
yeah, with the based on the outcome of this request, so if the rezoning is supported, whether the demolition is supported or not, if somehow the disposition of the existing structure will be addressed. And so we would look to hold the two parcels as one, especially given that the parking is provided on the separate lot.
Well, there also seems to be a little bit of division among the commissioners, whether they feel that some of these issues can be resolved through the applicant working with you and the village, or if we would like to see them addressed before
Yeah,
us.
I guess from my perspective, I'm okay, if the applicant works with staff in regards to, you know, the issues that we just talked about. I mean, really, again, I think the biggest thing is the landscaping and you know, if the neighbors to the north and west are okay with this application, again, it's a, like you said, it's an improvement to what they have there. I'm okay moving forward with the motion, but
Well, and
I would
ultimately
second
this,
that too. I think that staff could work out the details.
Well, the point I'll make though is that you could make the case that you could do a site plan review for a parking lot and all these issues we're talking about while rehabbing the existing structure. You know what I'm saying? So those two issues are really exclusive of each other, because if this Preservation Commission decides the other way, it's going to be a different site plan review. I mean, sure, the footprint is a little bit similar, but
what if we put
maybe
a-
they'd try to add on to the existing structure as part of rehabbing or
additional
something.
to
Yeah, what if
the
we put-
demolition permit being issued.
Right, I'm saying if it wasn't demolished, you know.
or conditioned to the site plan, though?
Well, the footprint could change, but I would say that, just call me, you can call me any name, but I prefer silly. But for parking, I would like to see where the handicap spot is supposed to go, exactly where the parking for the garbage is gonna go, so we can then see how the truck is supposed to come in to remove the garbage, and for the parking, exactly how that is supposed to work for deemed residents. Are the residents going to walk? Is it going to be open parking or closed parking? And basically, all has to do is Lot 4 would be filled in, and then all my questions probably are answered when I look at it Friday before coming in Tuesday. So basically, you
Yeah,
would get
I
back
guess-
like 15 to 20 minutes.
From my perspective, a lot of that stuff is code, you know, code required, like the accessible spot has to be closest to, you know, the front entrance, and, you know, those type of details that I think that we could, you know, the staff could work with the applicant on, but that's my perspective.
I understand that, but there's also no real landscaping, and then it brings up a whole bunch of questions on the side that faces Route 30. Do we really want to have that facing Route 30 and 25,000, or I'm sorry, Route 30 and 59? Because will be seen from the west, and maybe the landscaping is going to do that, or maybe we're just decided that two sides are good enough and we don't have to worry about the third side. But then all of a sudden, I just mentally can't seal one with the other. And also, the lawyer in me says, what if? And then all of a sudden, if they do want to have tenants with a business, and the historical commission says, oh no, the property needs to stay, well, maybe the footprint does change. And then maybe the parking does change and we have a substantially different thing. So I have the utmost respect for staff, but I'm thinking there are just too many variables that are existing. And that's really where I'm coming down. That I'm sure, 5 minutes of next meeting, everybody can look at me and say, really?
Well,
But, that it's really.
and these are issues that are going to come up at the board level as well. But that being said, we seem to have some division, but if there is support for a motion, I would entertain a motion and we can take a vote on it.
Were we going to do the two different
Well,
motions?
I think we go ahead. Let's go ahead and do the map amendment for rezoning, if there's a motion for that.
I move we adopt the findings of fact of staff as the findings of fact of Plan Commission, and furthermore, recommend approval of the map amendment, rezoning of the parcel commonly known as 15233 South Joliet Road from R1 to BT.
Second?
We got to vote by roll call, please.
Mr. Segerbrook,
Yes.
Mr. Renzi,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Heinen,
Yes.
Chairman Kiefer.
Yes. Motion passes. In regards to the site plan review, there is a motion in your packet. I would just maybe make a suggestion if we wanted to add a stipulation regards to when it goes forward that the photometric landscaping and trash enclosure, as well as any parking issues, would be resolved with staff. If anybody would want to entertain that.
Like, Mr. Chairman, I guess my question is, if we make a motion, can we ask the applicant if we if he wants us to make a motion tonight, because it sounds like if we make a motion,
Well,
we'll get support, but not from everybody.
well, and if you look within the staff's recommendation, it has, as part of the stipulations, submittal of a final landscape review, and also it would be approved by the planning department, and also submittal of lighting and photometric review for approval by the planning department.
I understand that, but,
Yeah.
you know, some of the commissioners may vote no because they don't have all the information in front of them.
Well, and that could happen.
So can we ask the applicant if he wants us to make a motion?
Well, no, no, it's before us now, and basically I'm entertaining a motion now, so if someone needs to make one and second it, if that doesn't happen, it dies.
Well, I just want to say again, I think I think I heard 5 days, basically, if after Preservation Commission. I don't think that's an unreasonable delay, for a project like this. And I also don't think it's a good precedent for us to be speculating on something that's not really under our purview. I mean, if the Preservation Commission decides something the other way, then what we're really deciding tonight doesn't mean a whole lot. So I don't like that precedent. I think we should respect their process and let them make their decision. And then I think
Well,
we'll have all the facts.
Something to entertain then would be a
Right.
motion to continue this portion
Right.
to the next.
I would be
Wanna make
happy
that-
to make that motion. Yes, I will. I'll make a motion that we continue the site plan review portion of this case for the office and residential building at 15233 South Joliet Road.
To our next meeting.
To our next meeting.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Can we get a vote by roll call, please?
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Heinen,
Present.
Mr. Renzi,
Yes.
Mr. Segerbrook,
Yes.
Chairman Kiefer.
I will also vote yes. So this portion of the request will move forward to our next meeting. In general, I think there's some support for this. What we'd like to see is the decision by the Historical Commission, and then also the final information. Are you clear on what we're lacking at this end?
Commissioners, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project. Okay. Our next case before us is case number 1727-0617.rez/su/pp/fp for 14125 South Van Dyke Road. Before us is a request for rezoning and a special use with a public hearing for preliminary and final plat. Do we have a staff report on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Believe it or not, the first case was the straightforward one out of the two. This is a little bit unusual, and so staff is bringing forward a recommendation regarding the map amendment or rezoning. It's staff's estimation that there might be, a uncertain recommendation on this, and so staff chose not to require the subdivision plat that would be required. The petitioner is basically requesting to rezone a portion of the property, and I'll get to the details and provide the site context here, but we've not brought forward a formal subdivision plat for the Planning Commission. If the case is processed and if there's support, it would be staff's proposal to come back with that subdivision plat, but to essentially spare the applicant the expense of taking on that portion of the project at this time. So with that, I guess I'll jump in and provide some background. The map amendment component of the case does require a public hearing, so staff would ask that the record reflect the appropriate notice was posted and published. In terms of site context, the subject site is on the east side of Van Dyke Road, somewhat north of 143rd Street. So it's bounded by on the north and east by the railroad right-of-way. To the south, there is an existing residential structure that's used as a home and also as the site of operating a towing company. To the west, we have Van Dyke Road, which is, I believe, a minor arterial. I didn't note that in my staff report. And further to the west side of Van Dyke, we have Diageo, obviously very large manufacturing use as well. The subject site is currently improved with a metal pole building in terms of an improved structure, and then there's in operation some outdoor storage use. There's a fenced-in storage yard that kind of wraps around the existing building. The case has really been initiated by a combination of the property owner's interest in improving the structure itself to become his residence, his primary residence, but also through the village's efforts to address some non-conforming issues there. So there's some outdoor storage on the front of the property that's not enclosed. There are some property maintenance issues with the building itself. And so this is kind of a comprehensive approach to say, how can we address some existing conditions that aren't necessarily in compliance with the village's codes and ordinances, and also to address the property owner's desire to make this structure into his residence. The use of the building currently, there's a center area that's it's habitable. It's improved with furnishings, and it's just a kind of a open recreational space. There are portions of the building that are used for storage of building materials, for parking, and for other things. So in the event that there is support to rezone the property to residential, it would be the property owner's obligation and requirement to work with our building department to process a whole set of building plans that would show how the interior of the building would be modified to become a residence. That would include such things as consolidating utility services. So we'd have one water connection, one electrical service panel, one gas meter, and so forth, that it really functioned as one dwelling unit. I'll give a kind of a brief summary of the findings of fact. Again, these are the same findings that we considered on the first case. In order for the Plan Commission to recommend approval for a rezoning request, it must find that the rezoning promotes the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare, and complies with the policies of the village. By approving the residential zoning requested by the property owner, it would facilitate his plans of improving the property and bringing the property up to or in compliance with a variety of non-conforming issues that are currently present on the property. So to that extent, it would address compliance with some of the village's plans and policies. The applicant has indicated that he would be improving the appearance of the building itself. So there have been some improvements made in the central area. A brick facade added. Those improvements would continue. So there would be some improvement to the overall appearance of the building. The second finding is that the trend of development in the area is consistent with the requested rezoning. This is a fairly isolated location here. So with Van Dyke Road on the west and the railroad tracks on the north and east, there are two residential uses to the south. So this would be a third residential use in that very small pocket. But staff certainly concedes the vast majority of the area is non-residential in nature, with manufacturing to the west, a little bit farther to the south, a little bit farther to the east, and even extending north on Van Dyke Road, there would be manufacturing or office uses. So this would be a kind of a small area, although this parcel on its own would not be the only residential use in the area. The third finding is that the new zoning allows uses that are more suitable than those allowed under the existing zoning. This is a case where staff is essentially neutral. I would submit that a residential use here would not be detrimental to adjacent properties. It would be compatible, but likewise, given the limited residential uses in proximity, staff does submit that uses currently permitted are also appropriate at this location. So that's a difficult finding for staff to clarify. And that kind of runs hand in hand with the fourth finding, that the property cannot yield a reasonable use under the existing zoning. Staff believes that there are suitable uses in the current I-1 zoning district that would be appropriate, but likewise, residential use could be supported without harm to the adjacent properties. So that would be the fifth finding of fact, that the rezoning would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood nor would it be a substantial detriment to adjacent properties. The residential use in the existing building here, in staff's opinion, would not harm the manufacturing to the west or to the, in the broader proximity. And there are some residences, the parcel immediately to the south and then the second one down are currently residential uses. So staff believes a residence could be compatible and would not result in negative impacts. So it's a case where in evaluating the findings, in some, staff believes some of the findings can be clearly demonstrated and some are perhaps neutral or at least are not negative in nature, would not be detrimental to other properties. And if it's the petitioner's request to convert the structure to a home, staff believes that could be accomplished without harming other properties. One aspect I did want to at least touch on, I'll go back to the site plan here. I'm giving a little bit of incomplete consideration to the subdivision. I at least want to acknowledge that, and I apologize. If the property were to be subdivided, there would be requirements for frontage along Van Dyke Road. So staff believes it's possible to make the minimum lot width and lot area requirements for an R1 zoned lot, but we'd have to look at where the lot lines fall to demonstrate the front and side yard setbacks and so forth, while still maintaining the applicant's desire to provide as much of that, retain as much of that outdoor storage as possible. So the subdivision is, a little bit of a, I don't want to say that it's entirely straightforward, and certainly I acknowledge from the Plan Commission side of things, you want to see the whole picture, and was it staff's intent not to unduly burden the applicant with a subdivision plat at this time, but perhaps that would be appropriate as well. So I acknowledge that aspect of the case. In advance of any public comment, staff believes it is possible to support a rezoning, and it's staff's proposal to defer any consideration on the subdivision plat until perhaps the village board makes a final determination. And that would conclude the staff report.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anyone representing the applicant here today? Could I get you to approach the microphone over there? We'll swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Is all testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
Sir.
Please state your name for the recording secretary.
Mr. Chairman and the commissioners, my name is Dave Mondo. Dave Mondo. I've been a village resident for 28 years, and I'm working with Mr. Chobar, the property owner, in a consulting capacity. I've helped him prepare for the application for rezoning, submittal drawings, material documentation, and that kind of thing. And I expect to stay with him through this process, and should we get the zoning approved for the residential, I will work with him closely to prepare all submittals for permits and to make sure he stays in compliance with village requirements and codes.
Is there anything you'd like to add to the testimony we've already heard, or anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I believe
the
Mr.
project?
Prohl has outlined the requirements. All I can add to it is I believe Mr. Chobar's intention here to rezone the property to R1 residential, obviously he wants to move in there. I believe that he's approaching retirement age, and he's kind of consolidating his assets, and I believe this is the first move in his efforts to do that.
Thank you. Please remain for any questions that we might have. Is there anyone from the audience who'd like to ask a question at this time? Seeing none, we will open it up to the commissioners for comments and questions.
So Jonathan, you're saying that in that wedge between Van Dyke Road and the railroad, there's two properties to the south that are already R1?
That's correct.
And are there only...
Well, I'm sorry. I apologize for the interruption. They're residential uses. Property is zoned industrial, so they're whether through annexation into the village, maintained as non-conforming uses, or whatever the case
I
may
think
be.
that happened when it was first brought into the village, because the property following that to the south was initially brought in R1 by default, and I think it was zoned residential.
Okay, so,
Zoned it light industrial, I believe.
And in this property, is Mr. Shovar living there currently in a non-conforming or whatever, or?
No,
Okay.
no, he's not.
So, but it would make 3 properties where there would be residences, that there would be people living at, right, in that wedge of in between Van Dyke and, so I'm trying to see what the neighborhood, if you could consider 3 lots a neighborhood, it would be residential purposes, kind of.
How
I don't think it
how are we
is.
getting 3? Isn't the building that's down on the hard corner, that's commercial?
That was
Right.
rezoned industrial, didn't we?
Are there
We
more than
rezoned it
properties in
industrial.
that wedge
Right.
in
When I think it was annexed in, it was a default annexed into residential, and then we rezoned it
Yes.
industrial, right? So aren't we really just talking this one house to the south, this one residential?
This particular triangle is strictly the location for this one building.
Yeah.
Right,
The south here is the resident, and that's where the towing company is down
Yes.
here.
right. So he owns both parcels, and he lives in the house right now to the south.
No, he sold that business, they just kept the name. That towing business is not his anymore.
Really? Okay. So who lives in that house?
I don't know.
Oh.
I believe the towing people live, I'm not sure. who lives-
So you're saying the people that live in that house to the south actually operate the towing business?
Pardon me?
The people that live in that house to the south actually operate the towing business?
that's,
Isn't there like a shared driveway between this
That's-
house and?
that's staff's understanding, is that the current operator of the towing business, which is not Mr. Shobar, resides at that structure. And it's a good clarification. I understood there to be 2 structures to the south there, but in looking at the aerial photo here, I looks like I was incorrect, so.
It looks like a couple of maybe a
I
couple
thought there
storage
were-
buildings to the back there, little small garage type structures or.
Oh, I apologize.
Well, again, we have a similar case before us. We've got one dealing with the request for the rezoning, and then the other is actually a request by staff, if we support the rezoning, to continue and defer the subdivision and the final plat review.
I guess from my perspective, I'm not supporting the rezoning, and the reason why is because, I see this as an industrial area, as an industrial use. I mean, we've got, hopefully 143rd Street is going to be extended, from Route 59 to 126, which will hopefully open, this gateway as the industrial corridor. I think we've always said this is the industrial corridor. So I feel like we're moving backwards if we're rezoning from industrial to residential. So that's why I won't support this.
Well, since we're talking about that, I'm not leaning towards support because we have to make findings A through E. And from my notes and what I heard from staff is that E is met, but as we go up, we have a few no's and neutrals and not applicables, and all we're left with is A, which I guess brings me to questioning staff, because for me, compliance doesn't equal promote. And you're talking about where it would be the existing use of the structure into compliance. So aren't we really letting the tail wag the dog if we say yes because we're voting for compliance rather than promotion of the zoning regulations?
Yeah, I would acknowledge that this is a case where staff was certainly identifying what the property owner's desire was, evaluating what harm or what negative impacts might occur, and
Because for me, I can't make the findings, and I've been on the commission a long time, and I think 3-1-1 is about as far as we've gone for any findings of 5, and for rezoning. And here, even if somebody says compliance does equal promote, that's still only 2. So I tend to side with the other commissioner.
Jonathan,
Well,
could-
I could-
hang on a second. Jonathan, could you clarify though? Also, if this was to go forward, they wanted to subdivide this lot, and then to the north, that northern triangle piece would still be used for storage. Isn't that the intent?
That's correct. So there are some existing code compliance issues. Some include maintaining vehicles for storage or trailers, things in the front yard area. So the applicant is kind of committed. Hey, I'm gonna move in here. I'm gonna fix up the building so it looks a little better. I'm gonna take care of some of these things and really come into compliance. But you're correct. The request is to maintain the outdoor storage use.
Ultimately, what we'd be doing is carving out a little niche in between for residential, where you would still have really surrounded by industrial.
To the in the parking
Railway.
areas, what you see is the paved or
And I think you've already indicated in your report how difficult I think this is going to be to comply with variances and setbacks for a residential lot, but you already brought that up. I'm sorry, Commissioner Geary?
Oh, yeah. I guess I'm just trying to see the big picture here. And to me, the landowner, it's the desire of the landowner. There's an occupant to the adjacent property. And I think looking at it in a bigger picture, we always talk about single-family dwellings, multifamily, and I'm thinking, I work in Chicago. There's lots of converted warehouses, industrial spaces that people have converted into residences, and it actually improves the value of the area. Not saying that would happen here, as there's only 2 properties, but I think we can't just write off, and say that that it's completely a bad idea. I think we should give the landowner the ability to work with the village, and if the landowner can get the setbacks and variances or setbacks and all the other issues taken care of, I think we shouldn't just stomp down on the rights of the landowner, and give them a chance to work with the village. And if the landowner wants to live there in that setting, in an industrialized setting, with a residence to the south, I say, give the landowner a chance. So I would be in favor of it.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you refer to setbacks, Mr. Kroll, are your setbacks meaning easements around
Yes.
the building proper?
So what's currently lacking is an actual formal subdivision plat that shows where the proposed lot lines are. It would have dimensions of the existing structure to the lot lines to verify. In an R1 zoning district, we'd require 30 feet from the front lot, 50 feet on an interior side, and 30 feet to the rear. So it's really just taking a look at where the proposed lot lines would be, what lot area is left for the outdoor storage use, and so forth.
Well, John, can I throw out another idea here? We actually have a very similar case like this up in Aurora right now. And it was ironically a towing company, and it was something where, again, the owners needed to get residency in the city. They had 2 structures on the commercial property, and they're converting one of those commercial structures to essentially a watchman's quarters or a little apartment or residence. But I believe it's being done as a special use, so the zoning stays, M1, industrial, whatever. And obviously it's a special use for them to have that watchman's quarters on the property, but I mean, I'm not sure why does this have to really go to a rezoning? I mean, essentially in the building code, an accessory use is something that's 10% or less of a building. Now, I'm not saying that, could he live in 10% of that building? Maybe, maybe not. If it was just a little apartment, you're saying he wants to downsize. But, I mean, couldn't we pursue something more like that where, fine, if he wants to carve out part of that building as a watchman's quarter, as a little residence, but keep it as a special use and keep the zoning where it should be, which is industrial, and not try to join these 2 things at the hip. I guess that's what I would offer.
I think if I can provide a frank response, I think it's an excellent suggestion. First off, 2 considerations. One is I think it's intention to utilize the entire structure without limitation, whether it's all or not.
Right.
So that's one aspect. The second and the more direct response is I think there are some building code considerations, and you may be more familiar, or you are, I know you are. I don't need to qualify it, but if it's zoned residential, that dictates, for example, perhaps a sprinkler system is not required. if it's still zoned
Oh, yeah.
commercial or industrial, even though residential use would be permitted,
Right.
the sprinklering would be required, and that would make it financially much more challenging for the applicant. So
Yeah, I mean, unless there's a way to maybe, internally put up a firewall type of a separation where, the rest of the structure is the commercial and then he's just in the smaller portion that's the residential with a fire
But
separation,
he's
maybe.
repeatedly stipulated that it's intent to have the entire structure as a home. He's not
Oh,
looking to
okay.
mix and match uses.
Yeah,
And it currently is not much more than almost like a pole barn type warehouse, correct?
That's correct. It's, interior, there are portions, especially the middle portion. It's essentially like a, very nice rec room. It's furnished. It's, the central portion has a residential appearance to it. There are other sections that have different uses, whether it's storage of some building materials, parking.
I guess,
Certainly. Could you stay on the microphone, please, because I can't hear you.
If Mr. Chobar were to attain the zoning change for residential, I know his intention was to surround the building with a brick facade, make it look residential, and landscape the front property between the building and the lot line or Van Dyke Road. But if we're not sure how compliance promotes the intent of promoting the neighborhood, I don't see why he wouldn't be adverse to making the building look more commercial from the front, even though it's residential within. It's a thought.
I guess we mentioned, we're looking at the big picture, and I got to reiterate, the big picture is that this is our industrial corridor once 143rd gets extended. And if we have a residential use in this industrial corridor, I see this as spot zoning, and, I'm not in favor of spot zoning. So when you say look at the big picture, I think we got to analyze that. This is our corridor that hopefully will attract business, especially once 143rd gets extended.
Other commissioners?
Well, I like it. I mean, you're saying he wants to downsize. Well, obviously, there's lots of ways to downsize. I mean, he could just sell the property and go, find somewhere nice to live. Otherwise, that's one way to downsize. I mean, to be honest, I was really surprised by this case because I always assumed that residential to the south, this was all affiliated, and I assumed he lived in that house and then, kind of operated the storage building to the north. I didn't realize it had been cut up, but I have to go with the fact that, I think it needs to stay the industrial zoning. I don't see how it can work as trying to do it as a residential zoning. If there was a way to somehow do it as a special use and give him, the right to live there in some kind of an apartment and not affect the zoning, maybe, but that's the only way I could see it happening.
That's not the request before.
Right.
So noted. Commissioner Renzi?
I don't have my microphone. I agree with the everything the commissioner said, and I agree with also. I guess I disagree with Commissioner Green. That'd probably be the easiest thing to say. That no, I don't think we should.
Well, what the chair could entertain then is a motion to deny the rezoning or a motion to adopt it.
I move we deny the findings of fact of staff as the findings of fact of Plan Commission, and furthermore recommend denial of the map amendment rezoning of the parcel at 14125 South Van Dyke Road from I-1 to R1.
Second.
A motion is made and seconded to denial. Commissioner Renzi seconded it. Can we have a vote by roll call, please?
Mr. Green,
No.
Mr. Segerbrook,
Yes.
Mr. Renzi,
Yes.
Mr. Heinen,
Yes.
Chairman Kiefer.
Yes. So this motion passes. The recommendation is denied for the rezoning. Jonathan, do you need any action then on the, I guess not on the preliminary final plat subdivision? We would.
No, staff understands the recommendation from the Plan Commission, and in part that's why the request was not made to take that step in the expense for the subdivision plat. We'll certainly convey the Commission's rationale when the case.
So our recommendation will go forward to the Board of Denial. I think you're pretty clear on what the concerns were by most of the plan commissioners regarding this case. Okay, well, thank you for coming before us tonight.
I do have a question before we move to anything.
Sure.
As to the first rezoning, that was continued to July 19th. In our packets, are we going to have the decision, or can that be emailed to us, or how is that going to be
So
put in our
the
hands?
HPC will make its recommendation on the evening of the 14th, and I'll be able to finalize my report the morning of the 15th.
And so that will be delivered on the 15th then? to us?
Correct.
Oh,
That would be good to know, yes. At this time, we have any open discussion? Before we get started on that, Jonathan, do you want to give us just a quick update on the search to add commissioners?
Certainly. So Chairman Kiefer, the mayor, and I conducted interviews with all 7 individuals who expressed interest in joining the Plan Commission. The mayor has identified 2 candidates that he will be presenting for nomination at a village board meeting on July 18th. So it's my expectation they'll be sworn in on the 18th and potentially be prepared to join you to serve on the 19th.
Sworn in at the village board meeting?
Just for kind of efficiency, they'll
They get appointed by the mayor, they take the oath, and then they come in, right? Any other discussion?
Just food trucks you mentioned. If somebody operates a food truck before the tax amendment comes through, do we have any governance for that?
So the village board has been taking up the question of food trucks as a temporary use. The village board has the authority in the zoning code to regulate temporary uses. That's typically things you'll see are like the farm stands in the summer. They're held in the parking lot at various commercial shopping centers. Most common outdoor use. You could have Christmas tree sales, things of that nature. So food trucks have been kind of treated that way. The board has developed a informal policy that food trucks are permitted on private property owner with the property owner's consent. So we would allow for food trucks, but it's becoming more common. Obviously, the nature of the food trucks and the perception has changed dramatically over the last probably five years plus, and now there's a certain cachet, or they provide.
Well, we have a food truck that's, I believe, regularly parked at the Mobile, and I believe that Mobile on Route 30 is in the city.
That's unincorporated,
Oh, that's
Not-
the
not in
site
the-
is unincorporated?
not in the village's limits currently.
Oh, okay.
So what prompted a request for some further review is that we had a business owner, it's actually somewhat planning related. We have a business owner, property owner in the village. They own a salon, and they were looking to build either a new building or expand, but because of the size of the lot and the setbacks, there's not a lot of room to expand, and they wanted to have a coffee shop. And since they couldn't add significantly to the existing structure, they had a creative proposal, which was to have a food truck essentially provide that ongoing presence for the coffee business that they wanted to kind of complement the salon. But I think the board wants to talk in a little bit more detail about what constitutes a food truck, and is there an expectation that it's itinerant, that it moves. Yeah, so
Not
that's
permanent.
we'll take that issue up next Monday.
So 2 quick things, if I may.
Certainly.
And this came from several of the residents of Plainfield and friends of mine. So concerns about safety, I guess, on at 2 intersections, and they wanted to get the village's input if they looked at either stop signs or signals associated with these intersections. The first one is, and I believe it's Renwick, where we put the new bridge in right by the river, the VFW right there. Am I saying that right? That's Renwick. Some concerns on crossing Renwick on whatever road that is. That's River Road. With cars going across the bridge pretty fast and being safety concerns. Has there been any concerns about
That intersection is it's under Plainfield Township's jurisdiction.
Okay.
I know the township is aware they're evaluating potentially a 4-way traffic stop there, a controlled
stop
intersection.
sign? Yeah.
There was they actually proceeded to at least provide some public outreach that traffic counts would be underway.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if it's the pedestrian bridge, some paving work. Anyway, there's a construction project that would have potentially, not invalidated, but, made the traffic counts, not representative of
Oh,
year-round, day-to-day conditions.
Okay.
So the choice was made to at least defer, that, kind of fact-finding.
Okay.
And where that stands now, I'm not sure.
so that's under township control right now. Renwick, is that Village Road then, or is that township?
Segments are the Village of Plainfield, so essentially between like Renwick Community Park and Route 59, it's a Village of Plainfield Road.
Okay.
As you continue to the east, it's actually a county highway. And then areas where the village
So-
hasn't annexed, it's under township control.
So at that intersection, it's
But
township?
directly at that
whoever-
intersection is township.
Township, that's all township then? Okay, so they should reach out to the township if there's additional.
Correct, yeah. I know there's interest in, it's not, both the village's Public Works and the Township Highway Commissioner are, evaluating if additional traffic control is warranted at that
Okay.
location.
And then the second intersection is actually 143rd and Meadow. So I know some residents that are on the north side of 143rd. So this is, west of Route 30, that intersection. They say that a lot of cars build up a lot of speed as they go down 143rd west of Route 30. And, if they had a control there, it'd be safer. So I don't know if the village has looked at that. I know they just put the new light on 126 in Meadow. But I don't know if the village has looked at 100.
I can say
That all Village Road there too.
that's the village, yeah. The traffic committee evaluated a request or a suggestion. This actually came out of a Coffee with the Mayor, a comment from a resident that as you travel west on 143rd and then make a left turn southbound into Liberty Grove,
Yeah.
there's a safety concern where if people are either stacking, turning into driveways right in close proximity to 143rd, people aren't expecting to stop. There's a concern there.
Yeah, they said they see a lot of accidents at that intersection.
I think that the traffic committee felt at least east and westbound stop signs wouldn't meet warrants.
Would not
Would not meet warrants for
or
in
they
that.
don't, safety concern.
So that we could perhaps address with additional signage. We're talking about maybe putting speed limit, very large speed limit painted signs right in the pavement. We've done that farther to the north. So this is within the limits of the Complete Streets initiative that the village has undertaken in the last year to a year and a half, where we're looking at incorporating additional traffic calming measures to address that on Meadow Lane.
So that actually is being analyzed by the Complete Streets Committee right now, or?
That's correct, yeah. So the village began implementation, I think, at 127th Street in Tuttle Estates. The process, the methodology is to incorporate some temporary measures.
Oh, yeah, I know they've
So
been some
chicanes
temporary
with the temporary curbing and
roundabout.
stuff. Evaluate, we'll do a speed and traffic study before and after to see what the effectiveness of those measures, gain public input from the residents of, how do they like them? Is it, something that they want to see made permanent? And then we work into our budget construction of the permanent improvements that are found to be most effective and welcomed by the residents.
So if they have more concerns or questions, direct them to the Complete Streets Committee?
Correct, either our lead engineer in Public Works or myself in the planning department would be, happy
you.
to provide those
Appreciate it.
details.
Any other discussion?
John, has there been any more, the Route 30 TIF, has there been further action on that, or is it still just being studied right now?
So we're very close to starting the public outreach portion of that. There have been a couple loose ends that we needed to complete, one being demolition of some existing structures, and that's just been delayed a little bit. There's some materials in the structures that had to be relocated. So I'm in regular contact with the property owner there at the Boulevard site on a weekly basis or more frequent, and we're actually hopeful that those structures will be demolished this week. That would allow our consultant to come in and do a final documentation of the existing conditions and demonstrate the meeting the criteria for TIF formation.
I just thought with the road project continuing along, I mean, obviously the timing could be good. I mean, if it happens,
That's correct.
And to piggyback on that, the old Phillips 66 that we converted to a Shell station, the monument sign has been taken out because I guess somehow the right-of-way was taken or whatever. So we now have a gas station that's up for, I don't know, about a year now, and it doesn't have any signage that's stating the price of gasoline, which I believe is contrary to statute, because everybody.
Down on 30 you're talking about?
Yeah, it's the Shell station, halfway between the Mobile and the new Speedway. And so, shouldn't they, I mean,
The business owner requested approval to relocate the sign, actually attach a sign to the south side of the building, I guess. And we indicated that that would be permitted. They just haven't proceeded to
oh, well, okay.
do that.
Because, yeah, there's nothing up there and no.
Just noticed that yesterday, actually.
And there's like, even like, you know, the signs that were put out for wet floors, they don't even have one of those just stuck out with gassed whatever.
I'd be happy to contact them. I know that question has come up previously as well, so I can reach out. It's not my understanding that's a village requirement. There's nothing in the zoning code that would require presence of a pricing sign, but it's logical. I would think they would want to do it for their customers, and I'd be happy to contact them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, 8:23, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Good week, everybody.
Good meeting. Yep.